Welcome to Let's Talk Data. In this episode, we talk about how multi-cloud can be defined, how to manage such an environment, and what security factors that need to be considered. My guests today are Jens de Koker, Product Manager for Infrastructure as a Service at Proact, and for this podcast, a very familiar face, Sedihn, CTO at Proact. We also discuss what the future holds for multi-cloud and many other interesting topics surrounding the area. As always, I hope that you'll learn something new and that you'll enjoy the show. So, multi-cloud, that's a term that we've heard a while now. We've been talking about clouds for a long time. There are private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds, and Proact is now talking a lot about multi-cloud. So, Per, I thought maybe we could try and define what we mean with multi-cloud.
Absolutely. It's like everything. There are different definitions of everything. And I think what we've seen in the last year, most people, when they say multi-cloud, they mean, several public clouds, several flavors of public cloud. But we think that is not really addressing what's happening with our customers and in the market. What we mean by multi-cloud, depending on your requirements, type of application, if you have security requirements, whatever, where you are in the world, you're probably going to have a mix of different things.
Right.
You will have the public cloud or the hyperscalers, mostly the big American ones, maybe other versions from around the world. You will also be looking at local clouds, the ones that are in your own geography, where you can have a legal placement of your data in your own geography. So local service providers that helps you with the local language, everything in your country. But also, and don't forget this one, it's also about, you refreshing, you re-architecting your own infrastructure. So you have the cloud-like capabilities, you can consume it in a very flexible way. You give the power to the user to consume report as APIs. So you have kind of the cloud characteristics of consuming IT.
You're talking about private cloud there.
That is the private cloud, exactly, the last one there. So, and we think, you need to think about all of these. Then you think about multi-cloud, and the mix is up to you as a customer. Everyone is unique. What type of mix do you have? So that's kind of our view. You need to think about all these aspects.
Right. And so the benefit of, obviously we could have a whole episode or maybe multiple episodes talking about the benefits that public cloud can give you depending on what company or a customer you are. But why would you like to divide that into multiple ones? Like, what's the benefit of that?
I guess it depends on what you want to do. If we go back a few years, if you wanted to be digital, if you want to be, the leading edge, you said, I'm going to consume a public cloud, then I'm really at the leading edge. Or I'm going to consume in the public cloud because I'm going to save money. That is unfortunately not that simple. That there are other things you need to consider. Ultimately, you come down to the ones and zeros. It is about your data. Right. It is about the location of data and also the legal location of data. But it also comes to, the architectural fit of your application. Your own legacy application that has been tailor-made to your specific requirements, your type of business for maybe a generation, doesn't automatically, you can't move that to somewhere else. There are so many dependencies, it's so technically intricate. So you really need to think about, maybe I should actually keep that one on premise and try to make more cloud-like capabilities around it. So it is harder than you think, but it comes down, to legal requirements. It's come down to technical and the technical fit, the architecture of the application. But of course, as always, it also comes down to cost, because It is not like, public cloud is cheaper. It can be cheaper. It can be much more expensive. It depends on what you want to do. So I think we were kind of perhaps looking for a quick, easy answer. The answer was public cloud, then I'm good. Everything is done. I'm ready. It is not that simple because it doesn't fit for everything.
No, right. Yeah, exactly. What's your take on this, Jens, as the infrastructure product manager at Proact?
I think multi-cloud is a term that is often used I think our viewpoint really is that you should use the cloud for its specific strength, really. Each cloud, whether it's a hyperscaler or local or service provider, they all have their different strengths, really, and you should be carefully looking which cloud you're going to be using for which type of workload, and eventually that will lead into a situation where different clouds are used for different use cases, really, and you will create a bit of a web using all the different clouds for those specific use cases, really. Like Per said, it depends really on a number of parameters. It's financial, it's operational, it's innovation, it's risk. All of those aspects together eventually will lead into a decision where a certain workload might end up, and that's basically every company's decision to make, every company's analysis basically to make.
Right. I guess it's very individual. But do we have any like good examples of a company utilizing different clouds and infrastructures in a way that fits at least our definition of multi-cloud?
I think most of our customers really are already using different types of clouds. It's been a trend that has been set for a number of years, maybe even a decade already, where companies started using cloud for certain use cases. I'm thinking about Office 365 or Salesforce, for example. The low-hanging fruit really has been migrated already to a certain cloud, and most of our customers are already using cloud for specific use cases, and additionally, we see that they are using other provided clouds for specific workloads, like backup, for example. Can be just this isolated use case, what to not to host yourself anymore.
That's true. But so you think about Office 365 when you think cloud, which many customers do. I've always personally been never really referring to SaaS solutions when I talk about cloud. I've always thought about like building the infrastructure, having the VMs, the containers, the applications, instead of having them on, for example, VMware hypervisor. But I guess I might be wrong there to think like that.
Well, I mean, that kind of adds to the complexity. When you talk about cloud, there are kind of different, I guess, levels of deliveries. You can have like the basic infrastructure, and you are, as a customer, responsible for putting up your application on top of that infrastructure and managing all the security around it. So that's one piece. The second one is more that you have more like ready-made platforms. So you have some of the pieces put together, but you still have to tinker with it and make it unique. It could be like development platforms for container applications. It could be AI type of analytics tools, but you still have to do things yourself. That's more like a platform as a service. And then we have the third one, which is the SaaS service. Basically, it is made for a specific purpose. It has functions, and you operate within those functions. There is nothing right, there is nothing wrong. I think what we might have seen in the early cloud days also, people said, if I buy a SaaS service, then I become innovative. Well, it might be a good decision, but you're probably not going to be innovative just because you use Office 365, because it is exactly the same for everyone else in the world. So it's nothing wrong with it, but probably not innovation. Innovation, then you need to create things yourself. You need to create applications, you need to create algorithms that make you unique in your specific line of business, and that is nothing that you can buy off the shelf. So again, there's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. It really comes down to what do you want to do? And I mean, if there is a function that, it's maybe not very unique for your business, it's not that's going to make you very special in the market. I mean, maybe SaaS application is the right way to go. The only caveat might be that your data is under complete control of the SaaS provider. Just think about that one. If that still is all right, rock and roll, be my guest.
I've always thought about it like you're either on-prem, you're on a hyperscaler, big public cloud provider, or maybe a local player. And that is how it works, kind of. But as you mentioned, I mean, there might be a lot of different SaaS providers that you're utilizing as well. And suddenly you don't have 3 different legal or compliance issues. You might have hundreds because you're using all these application SaaS solutions as well. That kind of grew pretty quickly in my head now.
Or are you breaking the law, or are you breaking the updated law? I mean, these things, we don't want to make it too hard for you, but unfortunately, you have to think about these things because they are important. They are difficult, but you need to address, the data aspect of it. What type of data is it? Does your local government or the European, the EU laws or even global laws, or even perhaps even more important, your customers, do they have an opinion about your data? Is it data that is under some type of legal compliance rules, regulations, whatever? You need to be aware of it because you might, for not intention, but you actually might be breaking the law, or you did it a few years back and then it was okay, and now suddenly you might be breaking the law. And I think one of the obvious one right now is the GDPR versus Cloud Act, and they to some extent kind of goes against each other, so that is something that we need to solve, probably not technically, more legally. How is this going to work for the future? It's an interesting, and sorry to say, but you have to take these things into your perspective. We have customers of Proact, and their customers have realized that they are actually providing some of the services utilizing public cloud without telling their customers about it, and they actually have to go back and remove data out of the public cloud back into Sweden. So it has happened already, So you need to be transparent. If you're going to do it, be transparent, and especially if you're delivering function services to other, you really need to understand. They need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And bringing data back is not free, I've heard.
No, it's not free, and it can be technically very hard if you build yourself into functions that you can't replicate on premise.
Right, and that's another thing, right? I mean, the more clouds you use, the more tools you'll probably have to learn and new services and stuff like that, as everything seems to be like proprietary to that cloud, I guess. Or maybe, or maybe like utilizing Kubernetes, which is one tool, can be obviously done everywhere, and thus my statement is wrong. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'm guessing it's you'll have to weigh out the advantages and disadvantages of using different clouds. And the advantage obviously is that you can get access easily to different specified functions, really. But like you say, the creation of a multi-cloud environment, the setup really isn't difficult. It's just a matter of clicks. Even with the credit cards, you can do it easily. Spin up a virtual machine, or even something else, something innovative. But the tricky part is what comes after it. It's maintaining everything that you've spun up, and especially keeping control over what you've created, and doing it all securely. And that's
and I guess just to complement that, what you said also, Nick. I mean, you talk about perhaps the most open and standardized thing there is in the world, containers. And they're kind of, and say, okay, so how are you going to handle your containers? You can do it on premise. You can build your own kind of private cloud around it. There are certainly local service providers like Proact and others, that provide this as a service offering. And of course, they are available at the hyperscalers or the so-called public clouds, But, there are kind of different flavors. One is, of course, that will you run this natively? Will you take the kind of the open source tool and run it? that gives you the full, not being locked in, the full flexibility. But of course, it takes a lot of resources and skills from your side to make it happen.
Yeah.
Should you more use kind of pre-built Kubernetes as a services that are built by us and others, meaning that you will have some type of lock-in. It's not as open because there are specific things around that service, specific ways of operating, specific APIs. So, I mean, whatever you do, you're always going to be locked in as long as you do it with open eyes. And then realize, okay, I don't have the skills and resources to do it myself. I do have to have someone else doing it for me. As long as you're aware of it and you make those decisions, it might be all right. But everything is at one stage, because if you want to be completely free and not locked in with anything, I guess you have to do it everything yourself and support yourself. So, and most organizations don't have the skills and resources to do that. So it's always kind of a balancing act, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I guess so.
And obviously, you can also say, if you're gonna do everything yourself, obviously you can, but then you will waste precious time on business innovation, business projects, etc. So eventually, cost-wise or lock-in-wise, you can do everything yourself, but probably doing everything yourself will have a business cost as well because you're missing out on important projects.
That's true.
And what you can say, try it, because what we've seen happening, and I think this is, primarily around new application development, kind of staying around the containerized applications, where we've seen a lot of innovation, and that keeps happening. And this has usually been driven by the development teams. They kind of built these platforms. The IT operations could not really support them because there were new platforms, new skills. Speed was important to get things done. But there is kind of, after the innovation phase, you come up with a new service, a new function, a new app, whatever you're doing. Then it is, the Monday morning, and your customers using it. Something is broken. You need to fix it. You need to upgrade it. So what we have seen is the innovation phase has been running really fast, but the operations taking care of this, handling the life cycle of all the functions, hasn't really been catching up. I think a catchy term over the last year has been DevOps, but it's been Dev and it's been Ops, but they haven't really been together. So right. if you're able to get the developer teams and the operational team working together and really say, okay, this application is cool, innovation, new, it's fast, but we also have to operate. We have to upgrade. We have to think about security. If you get these things in sync, then I think the real magic will happen.
True. Yeah. I mean, DevOps, that's been a big and long conversation as well, right? It's a way of working and not the tool and so on. And I guess the tools are now being more and more available in different places, and thus you should really look at what you can utilize to make that as effective as possible. And therefore, multi-cloud might be a good fit for you. What about security and multi-cloud? I guess there's, we've talked about some legal aspects, but that goes as well with connectivity. I mean, that must be a pretty big challenge. There are so many aspects to this that you have to consider, I guess, and security is obviously one. Jens, how do you look at security for like a true multi-cloud environment? How can you set up like your access management? How can you span your network so that you have one network and not multiple to manage and so on?
Well, it all becomes very much more complex than it used to be. Yeah? Instead of just having one location to keep updated and patched and secured and connected, etc. Now you will have 2, 3, 4, 5 even locations logically then, and as well as geographically. So what does it mean in terms of security? It just exponentially grows the security risks, because you have so many more single point of failures, so many more things to keep an eye on. and with the people available with less time, spending actual time on innovation. Security most of the time is the very first one that drops off the list until something happens.
That seems to be an issue regarding almost anything. I mean, app development, infrastructure, multi-cloud, and that's an issue in my opinion.
And it might seem like we're saying we're making it harder for you already have this. Most customers have deconsolidated the infrastructure over the last few years. You might have had one data center, quite rigid, a lot of processes, maybe not that dynamic, but it was kind of in one place, maybe replicated to another data center. Suddenly you are already in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 12 places, depending. If you count the SaaS applications, I think most customers are probably in 40, 50 different places already with their data.
Yeah.
So this has already happened. It's not like we are saying, okay, it's going to be on either. This has already happened. So what do we do to catch up? And how do we, and that's, it's always like this. The burst of innovation, new ideas, businesses driving this, then we have to catch up, So how do we handle this, deconsolidated architecture? Well, first you need to acknowledge that you have one, and then you can start fixing it, say, okay, how can we do it? How can we get a grip around this one without slowing everything down? And that's going to be the trick. And there is kind of no single easy answer, but certainly what you will have to look at, at the fundamental level, you have to start abstracting every infrastructure. You have to start automating. And you have to start looking at, more clever tools than you have used in the past. If you just stay with the operational piece, having all these skilled people, that you need to operate a very deconsolidated environment. And by the way, it's going to get worse because we only see the start of IoT, Industry 4.0, the edge, So it's going to be even more deconsolidated, not less. And just face it, that is the way it's going to be, because that is what the business is going to require, So it's not that it's an option. Just say, okay, how do I get my hands around this one? And I think partly, apart from having skilled people, because that is always the foundation, you also have to utilize the new clever tools to actually run your environment. So I think we're going to see intelligence, so to say, AI tools, in operations. So the AI ops type of movement we just seen starting, can we use algorithms that help us and support us on top of, the abstraction, because you have to abstract the hardware, including the networking. It's super important now that we abstract the networking, because otherwise it will not work. You need to automate all of this one, because then you reduce the risk by actually doing it the same way every time. And so there are, and of course applying software to do some of the tasks, so your people can focus on really, really important, or probably architectural decisions more than daily operational decisions. So taking some of the medicine, the stuff that you're inventing for your customers around AI and cool algorithms, whatever it is, you have to deploy those internally when you operate your environment. So there are things happening. And of course, the multi-cloud also gives opportunity, like ransomware. If you can physically separate your environment, because if you have 2 data centers, you replicate the data, and it was all inside your environment. Ransomware on the left, or in one data center, ransomware on the right in a second data center, milliseconds later. Now you can actually, by utilizing a multi-cloud in a clever way, you can decouple your IT with someone else's IT and get a better protection around ransomware attacks. So this also opens up new opportunities. It's not just problems. So there are cool new things happening.
Per, you're telling me that many customers are already utilizing multiple clouds in one way or another, at least with SaaS applications or SaaS platforms and stuff like that. And we've been talking about that it can be messy and so on. But so, is there a good way to manage an infrastructure that is spread out like this? What should you think about?
A couple of concepts here, obviously there is kind of the multi-cloud management tool, which is basically a framework. And I think some of you kind of remember the frameworks from the past. You're going to manage everything in IT from kind of a single product. And we haven't really seen that taking off yet. And I'm not sure we ever will, because if you think about it, that is quite complex, because suddenly you have a tool that is going to span, over several clouds, your internal private cloud, perhaps a local service provider, and maybe several iterations of public cloud, or perhaps, a mix of the two, saying you're combining your internal private cloud and you have some workloads in the public cloud, then you have some type of hybrid, or a mix of two or three of them. That's kind of my definition of a hybrid. And how do you get a tool, that can manage all of this? And yes, yeah, if you look at especially the speed of change with the public cloud providers, I mean, they have like more than 1,000 new services or updates of services per year per public cloud. How do you keep up? You're always going to be behind. So I think we probably need to do it a little bit differently. You need to have the right skill sets. So your IT operations organizations do have to have the cloud skill set. Understand the cloud. They need to have understanding of modern application development, containerized applications. They need to be able to understand Linux and the way you automate with Linux, because I think here you're starting to see some of the answers. You need to think about when you're deploying things across a mix of clouds, you need to start to standardize, you need to start automating, you need to start templating. So there are different types of templates that you can actually describe how you're going to set up. Let's pick a public cloud. And there are technologies like Terraform. We actually say, when I set up my public cloud, I'm doing it in the standardized way. I've described exactly how to set it up, And as long as you follow the standard when you set it up, it's going to be much easier for IT to manage that, because it's set up in a way that's been standardized. So maybe part of the answer is standardizing, templating, and actually making your infrastructure programmable. And so you don't do everyone is doing it their own way.
Right. So Terraform infrastructure as code, really.
That's probably, instead of saying I'm putting a big management framework on top of several public clouds, probably more work with standardization, templates, and programmability of your infrastructure would probably be my. Terraform is one example.
Would you say that technologies like that are getting that standard wherever they are? I mean, we know that works up in the clouds and here and there. But what about my 2-year-old infrastructure on-prem?
Oh, that might be a different story. And of course, there are different types of templates depending on the public cloud. So, but of course, there are kind of, let's say, cloud independent versions of it. So I'm saying, if you have an old infrastructure that is not abstracted, it is not automated, it is not programmable, then you don't have a private cloud. If you have a private cloud, So if you have a private cloud, then it's going to be programmable. Then you can program it with templates. You can use the built-in from whoever you're using, like WiiWare, or you can use separate one that is, not from a specific vendors. You can use the built-in with Amazon or Google or Azure, or you can use separate ones. It is the same, So yeah, on your own infrastructure, if you can program it, then you have a private cloud. If you can't, you have some work to do.
True. So it sounds like if you want to be able to utilize or cherry pick all the cool services that are available out there in different data centers owned by other companies, you need to first of all create a private cloud and cloudify your current infrastructure, either move to some form of cloud infrastructure or build one yourself, to then be able to utilize the automation tools and the new standard tools that we're seeing being utilized everywhere now, except for old on-premise infrastructures. And first, then you can apply it. When you can apply it on all the different clouds that you're using, then you can start managing it like one infrastructure again, perhaps. That's what I'm hearing.
I would even go one step further. You're saying that that you have to make sure that the private infrastructure is ready for template standardizing, automation, etc. But it's even the internal organization that has to have a mindset of standardizing it.
Sure.
It's got to be built into the organization that we're using standards now, and we're going to automate as much as possible, because in the end, techies love fiddling around with things and not do the standardized way, because that's in the end the interesting stuff,
That is true. But they're also lazy and want to automate things away, right? I guess, like everyone.
I'm not lazy. I think part of why IT is behaving like this, because IT is super good at having their users, asking them for something special, and they will build something special for them. It might take some time. It might never be ready, but it's going to be special. And sometimes special is needed. But I think you should always ask you, and this is what we've seen, when we started building private cloud, utilizing VMware technology many years ago. One of the hardest thing to do was actually to make their users understand there are standards, there are pre-built functions. If you click on it, or if you access through an API, you can have it instantly. But it is a box, it has certain functions, it has certain size, it behaves in certain ways. And as long as you accept that, you can get it instantly. If you want to have a special, it might take us a year or 2 or 3. And this is exactly how the public cloud works. The public cloud are boxes, and they work in a specific way, and that's the way they work. And you adopted that one. And IT has always had a tendency saying, okay, but we can tweak it, we can do it a little bit different, we can do it a little bit better, or a little bit extra, an extra sauce on top of everything, and it makes it much cooler. And that is sometimes needed, but it should be the exception. It should not be the rule. And when we build private cloud, one of the things that we had to have customers doing is put in place this discussion. Are you willing to pay the extra money and take the extra time to do the special? Or can you accept the standard that's probably going to take you 80-90% of the way, but you can get it instantly? And I think the history has proven that everyone is willing to do that in the public cloud, because that is exactly what you do. However, maybe not always internally. And I think, we have to have that mindset. So it's not the technology, it is a mindset. It's a way of charging, and it's a way of describing services and the consequences of not following the standards. So I think we as been working in internal IT have some lesson to learn from this one.
Probably. So that was management, but obviously you will have a lot of different bills coming your way as well, with everything spread out here and there and so forth. It must be, very hard to keep track of cost, and how can you predict it and build budgets and so on. I know there might be some tools specific for some cloud providers to be able to maybe predict based on historical, usage and stuff. But I guess that's an issue. Do you have any comments about that? How do people do it? What should you think about when you're looking to utilize all the resources out there?
It really depends on the requirements of the company. Yeah? Some companies don't really have an issue with having unpredictable costs. That the monthly bill varies throughout the year. Other companies, and I'm guessing that it's more of the larger companies, those do want predictable costs. They want to know what the bill will be at the end of the month, because they have to do specific forecasting at the beginning of the year. What the cash flow will be, and like we said before, that's also a factor that you'll have to take into account when choosing a cloud. Typical hyperscalers, there we know that the bill varies, and that the financial department might object against the unpredictability of costs. For example, another cloud might be easier than to predict. So just like operations, just like innovation, just like security, I think the finance part or the predictability of costs is just another factor of choosing which cloud.
True. Well, are there any tools like?
Can I add just a thing on that one? It is. I mean, how do you measure cloud cost? And I think you mentioned you have to predict it, because you will not know 100% exactly what it costs until after you've used it. There are factors that you don't know until you used it. The line part you can probably know, and I think it also, like if you make a bigger and longer commitment, you get a better price. So there are those factors there, like everyone else. But I think we're starting to see the financial department and pay attention now, your IT techies, when they start to see bills coming in from public cloud providers, and it seems to be not under control, or you might see innovation projects that is actually being financed out to the IT budget. If you start picking all these bits and pieces together through expense reports and invoices to projects, and IT costs or internal IT budgets, you might have some interesting surprises. And I think there is a playing phase or innovation phase where it might be okay. But there is a Monday morning, when the CFO comes and say, what is happening with this project? Where is all this money going to? You really have control of this one, and you don't want to end up there, So cloud building, it's almost a dark art by itself. There are built-in tools. There are certainly external tools as well that can be utilized, but it is a tricky one. But you need to get track on that one, because otherwise it could spiral out of control. And there are some fundamental bits and pieces. You need to tag things to certain use cases or projects and things like that, because otherwise you're going to have bills all over the place. You might not even know where they are connected to, and you don't want to end up there, because someone who is counting the money is going to start objecting.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like I guess everybody can find some familiarity in the sense that they can connect with that from like a video subscription point of view privately. Like you have all your different streaming services, and there are different music services, and the children are utilizing some, and you are maybe utilizing some, and then you forget about some. And if you sum them up, you'll get a surprise, probably. That's why I try to avoid that personally. But I maybe should look at that, my personal subscriptions. But with the caveat here, that it's also of variable costs for every service, so to speak, or every cloud, or every VM, or every backup of VM, and so on. That it is
exactly, and this, and I think, if you look at analysis, and we've done quite a few of those, the obvious one is that you are buying the wrong type of instance, because things change so rapidly. So you might be buying a too expensive instance, or you might be buying something on a very short term, and you keep using it over a long time, because you get a heavy discount if you use it for a longer time. So there are some obvious ones that you should look at first. Yeah, and there are tools to help you to do this.
It's my understanding that many, or most maybe, cloud consulting firms actually work with just looking at a customer's cloud usage and try to, like, what are they utilizing?
How complex it is. You need a bloody consultant to fix the bill,
Exactly. To see what you're using and not using.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And as always, common sense. In a small project that is well under control, you have it well defined, you're going to be using it for a few months, But things can easily get out of control, and I think we have done the same mistake. I think when we started playing with this 5-6 years ago, we maxed out our credit cards because we forgot to turn off the instances.
Classic.
The weekend, the classic one. We done it all.
Yeah, I guess. So there's probably, we've been talking about big public clouds with all the coolest new functionality that fluctuate a lot in the cost, perhaps, but they have all the bells and whistles. We've talked about local players as well a bit, but not really enough. for instance, like we've created a cloud called Proact Hybrid Cloud, PHC for short, to mediate some of these issues. Jens, you're the product manager of PHC. Really, what? There are many issues that we've been discussing, but what specifically would you say is PHC's approach to a cloud?
PHC, according to us, is one of the pieces of the puzzle, basically. Yeah? So we've talked about the multi-cloud approach. We've discussed that that there is a reason for being for each cloud, depending on a number of factors, really. And according to us, each cloud has a reason for existence, and PHC specifically addresses a couple of factors that are important to companies, like for example, data locality. Things that you can't attain with hyperscalers, for example. Customers can be sure that their data is kept within countries' borders, but at the same time, they don't have to do all the management themselves. We take care of the underlying infrastructure. We take care of updates, patching, security. So we address a number of typical cloud benefits with PHC that not necessarily are found in other clouds.
Okay. Oh, I see. So does that do like
you don't get all the bells and whistles of hyperscaler? I mean, they got amazing functionality, but you get a local language in your country legally in every way, and I think a good fit for your application stack that you already have today. You don't have to rebuild your application to make them fit. It works out.
All right. Yeah. So like a step.
And an important one to add, perhaps, to the benefits, let's say, is I think the personal approach. In hyperscalers, it's often said that you're just a number. You have to take an additional subscription to have support, etc. Somebody to call. We have dedicated service delivery managers for our customers that actually know you, that know you by name. That we build a relationship with, that that we know that where you want to take your business, really. So it's essentially, I think, an additional point that I would like to make is that we want to work with you on creating the most out of using this type of cloud. Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. So it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's like a familiar place, cloud step maybe to not having to manage infrastructure, utilizing the tools that you're used to. But so what if I need, what if I want to have a super cool bells and whistles project, and I'm partially a customer to PHC?
It kind of depends. We do develop PHC over time based on what customers are asking for. So it kind of depends what it is. And if you talk about new types of applications, could I run a containerized application kind of next to my application that fits on a hypervisor? The answer is that is something we are bringing to PHC. Could I get the software stack and the specific hardware to run certain types of AI software algorithms? That is something we are bringing to PHC based on requirements from customer. So I mean, I think we will cover a lot of the use cases, but there is a scale that certainly any service provider like Proact cannot provide versus hyperscaler. And that's not even our intention. That's impossible.
Absolutely. But to tie back to one important thing that you said in the beginning, really, it's not about the infrastructure and here and there when it comes to multi-cloud. It's about the data, right? So it's about, I guess the question really is data mobility here. Like, how easy can I move my data? When we're talking about multi-cloud, maybe I want to utilize the bells and whistles in Cloud Hyperscaler 1, and then suddenly one day it's cheaper in Hyperscaler 2. I want to move everything there and start doing the same thing in another place, maybe. Or maybe I want to start a project in a local service provider like Proact PHC. Can I then move that and maybe scale it for testing to a public bells and whistles cloud? I guess that's my is it easy? I guess that's my question here, because it has to be fairly easy to do. If you have a multi-cloud environment, I guess you don't want new silos. You want
you're going to get if I start Jens with it depends. It's kind of the techie answer. It depends on if you talk about I think that the coolest thing about things like containerized applications, they are completely, you can move them around. They're not really, unless you lock yourself into some specific PaaS platforms. They are mobile. You can move them anywhere and you can run them anywhere. However, because there is an however, if they contain a lot of data. I mean, a container could basically, just have a few libraries, maybe kilobytes, of the no worries. It's going to be instant. But if you have a container that is, you have 6 petabytes of data, you're going to have a small problem, and it's called the speed of light. And there is nothing that can change that one. So I think also within the right analysis, yes, it can be done. There are also a way of actually utilizing your data in your data center from a public cloud without actually moving things around. So there are architectures that is possible to bridge this. But I mean, a container, easy. 6 petabytes of data, moving them around, different types of cloud, private, Proact, that is going to be super hard.
Yeah, and expensive. I totally get that. That was okay.
Can I read the question? Jens, I think you had a comment on this one.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right. But if we take a look at the past, where we come from, moving a virtual machine, including all of its data, indeed was hard, because simply you're relying on the amount of data that you have to transfer from one side to another. Now, with the rise of new technologies, with the rise of cloud, like Per said, containers were developed, and one of the main benefits of containers is indeed that they're more transportable than a virtual machine. So technology-wise, I think we have taken steps. And I think we will see more steps in the short future, even. So you can see that we are slowly moving towards a world where workloads are shifted from one side to another, and containers being developed, or slowly becoming the standard, if I may say. Is basically the start of it.
Yeah,
but there is the magic. I mean, if you look at the use case, and this is just the criteria you have to put up for yourself as a customer. You have a use case, and I'm going to be creating multi-petabytes of data. If you do that, don't expect it to move it around. Expect it to stay where you put it. I think that's one of the design criteria, and that might sound logical, but I mean, if you are, let's say, let's give you an example, and I can take this from a customer. They in the medical industry, and they just already a few years back, I had a discussion with them, and they had, in that case, 3 hyperscalers, each containing multi-petabytes of data. And suddenly they wanted to move from one hyperscaler, which was really good at certain things, to another hyperscaler, which was so they kind of generated a couple of petabytes in one hyperscaler, but they say the analytics tool of another hyperscaler was better. Mm-hmm. However, then you paint yourself into a corner, because it's going to take you a lot of time and a lot of money to move from location A to location B. Meaning that your design criteria, if that was the use case, was wrong. You should never put all that data in that way, because or maybe it kind of happened over time, but so I mean, if you have applications generating large amounts of data, don't expect them to be movable ever.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was more referring to like imagine you having a test environment in one cloud, might be PHC. Might be another big one, but let's talk about smaller local players. So you're there for the cost predictability, for using the tools that you might be used to, and so on. You have a test. You have a development project that you do there. Then you want to test it on a big scale. So you move one build of the code to the cloud, clone it there, thus not moving any large amounts of data, just to test it. It might be over 24 hours, and then you close it down. How easy is that today with the technology that, for instance, we are utilizing? Is that something I can do? Like spanning my network to public cloud, yes. sending the containers that I need to send there, cloning them, testing them, closing it down, back home again.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. There's something that you obviously can do. We personally with PHC then it's an IaaS offering built on VMware technology. We all know that VMware is market leading, state of the art, etc. So we are following the roadmap of VMware there. So all of the items that VMware is developing, we're kind of following the market there. So essentially, if VMware and our other partners are enabling those features, we can offer it to our customers as well. And containers or AI are examples of those use cases. VMware is aware that containers are coming, so they are providing the functionalities, the tools to their service providers to actually enable containers for their customers, and that's what we are basically following. We're enabling containers for our customers because indeed we know that they are developing on those and that they want to try and test it in other environments.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I mean,
and I guess if we kind of talk about PHE, one of the areas which is pretty cool with VMware technology, and some of you might not like it, but they have some really good technology, is around NSXT, where you can actually safely kind of extend your network and with the hypervisor, with the virtual machines, into public clouds. So there is a kind of very safe extension, outside. So if you're really security conscious, and you want to, perhaps, you develop something on the public cloud, you test it there, and then you move it back. There are kind of very safe ways of doing it. It's not, maybe it doesn't fit for everyone, but there are, for kind of enterprise customers who have very stringent, policies around the data, that could be, and it is a cool technology, and also it's an abstraction layer, and it's also an automation layer. So it hopefully will help you with IT operations at the same time. So there are ways, and I think the use case you talked about, Nikko, I mean, you maybe develop an application that that is, maybe it's not going to be super big initially, but you can put it in the public cloud, scale it out, test it, can actually scale it, right. Turn it off, you're done, and as long as you don't need to keep, multi-petabytes of data, just shut it down, and it's working. So, I mean, utilizing those functions, those features, of the combined multi-cloud architecture. Maybe burst workloads, you run out of resources on premise. There are ways of bursting, into public clouds, so you can collect resources there. It hasn't perhaps happened as much as we thought, but it's more to do with the application landscape and
the classic Black Friday example. Yeah, where everybody goes to the web stores and overloads them so that the store can't sell anything. Yeah.
If you look at the application architecture, it might be pieces of the application architecture that fits perhaps in a hyperscaler, and other pieces of the say application, maybe an Oracle database in the backend that actually should be on premise. So maybe you should combine, the multi-cloud in the architecture.
Right. It's very interesting and so multifaceted, and so many different choices. It's like a buffet of really new, not only technologies, but new ways of consuming IT on a global scale. This cloud in particular, but multi-cloud in very specifically, and with the new software-defined tools that are existing, making that even easier to do. I think it's a very interesting and exciting time that we're living in to be able to talk about this and talk about it like it's reality, because it is.
It is. I mean, and we are not, suggesting that, the multi-cloud is something you're going to start building now. You have built it already.
Exactly.
It might not be completely under control for most of us, but you already built it. It might be IT, it might be outside IT, but you're all in a multi-cloud architecture already. You just need to get your arms around it. The decision to step into multi-cloud architecture were the right decisions. What do we have there? I mean, our application architecture, your data, legal use of the data, and certainly cost and cost control. They all come in here, but you already have a multi-cloud architecture, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
With very few exceptions.
Yeah. So let's round off with another. We started this by defining what we think multi-cloud is, and I think older term, or another term at least, is hybrid cloud. And multi-cloud. Obviously, it sounds like it's kind of the same thing there. Per, what do you say? What's the difference? What is this hybrid cloud? Just to make that clear.
I know. I listened to one of our vendors, NetApp's CEO George Curry, and he's also he's using hybrid multi-cloud. That kind of covers all the bases, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
My view is that you can have 10 clouds, but no hybrid. But for me, the hybrid, and this is just about definition, and I think when we define multi-cloud, the combination of a contemporary cloud-like architecture and consumption model internally, and that's a lot of work.
Internally, and then you mean on-prem?
On-prem, internally, the private cloud, that is part of it. Certainly service providers like Proact and others, have the local clouds, with the benefits of a local cloud. And of course, the hyperscalers, they're all part of this architecture. That's kind of the multi-cloud. The hybrid is when you combine a couple of them, not just that you have them, but you actually combine them with moving workloads or bursting into it or starting a development project in a hyperscaling, moving it back on premise. So when you have these things connected and working together, then you have a hybrid. So meaning that, well, don't I always have a hybrid? Well, you can have your own internal infrastructure and Office 365, and they might never talk to each other. So maybe you don't, So when they are kind of connected, and working together in some type of use case, then you have a hybrid in my world. But I think the most important thing for you listening is that you have your definition of this one, something that you agree on internally. In the IT organization, in the business. What do we mean by cloud? What do we mean by multi-cloud? What is our strategy? How do we make those choices? And where do we start? How do we decide if to use a hyperscaler or not? How do we decide to update our internal infrastructure to make more like a private cloud? How do we make those decisions? What are our design criteria for doing it? And I think you need to agree on the definitions, whatever they are. We have our definition because what we are seeing from our customers, what we are seeing from IDC is that these areas are all growing. The private cloud area investments are growing. The local service provider, like the PHC, is growing, and the hyperscalers are growing. All three of them are growing at the same time, meaning that they probably address different types of needs and use cases. And that's the important thing. What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? And will there be customers or authorities having opinions about what you're doing? You need to think about these criteria. And probably a CFO, someone, someone a bean counter looking at the numbers saying, hey, come on now, be careful with the money. Probably all of these would be my take on it.
True. Cool. Jens, any final words?
Hybrid cloud and multi-cloud really hybrid cloud was a term that was often used, I think, a couple of years ago. Now we've moved into multi-cloud, and like Per says, I think at a certain moment the market realized that that they've got applications working together, and therefore the term hybrid cloud was formed. Now throughout the years, we realized that it's not only these applications that are working together. We've got SaaS applications, we've got PaaS, we've got whatever, and all of a sudden it became more complex, even if you take a look at it from a distance. And I think essentially that's the reason why the term multi-cloud was created, to really be able to grasp everything from a logical perspective, than what the environment looks like. And so including the different applications, including Office 365, all of the SaaS offerings that a company is using, is really used to define, or the complexity there regarding that aspect, or regarding that infrastructure. Multi-cloud is used as a term to highlight it.
And we are saying, it is getting, more complex. It is getting harder. It is more deconsolidated. That is a fact. But the big question is, why? And as long as the answer to that question, why, it's because we are, we have a new market, we have new competitors. We try to be more competitive in our market, or if you're a private company, be competitive, making more money. In the public sector, probably serving our citizens. As long as the why is that we try to evolve our business, we try to be better. You have to face the facts, and you have, and you will have a more complex environment to manage. But as long as this drives innovation, it drives a business forward. Whatever you do, serving citizens, making more money for your shareholders, whatever it is, then I think the purpose is right. And we as IT have to step up to the new challenge, because it's not going to be less, it's going to be more, because we have what we are going to be hearing, and this is where we are adding into the multi-cloud definition of Proact. What we're seeing as part of what customers are doing is the edge, whatever that is, sensors, self-driving cars, heart monitors, whatever it is, a lot, I think, in the health sector, I think and hope. It's going to be part of, and the edge is not a private cloud. The edge is not a local service provider. The edge is not a hyperscaler. It is another category, which is out there somewhere, So, and I think if the reasons for doing it, there is a business driver or an organization driver for at the hospital, better take care of our patients, monitor them, draw better conclusions out of the health data generated by watches or whatever it is, as long as the purpose is to do something better. We as IT have to step up to that challenge and support it. If it's just because people didn't ask the question, they were lazy, or they hate IT, want to do it all by themselves, and that's the only reason, then it's the wrong reason. But for the right reason, the world is going to be multi-cloud, and we will be adding the edge definition, because we are seeing customers already looking at edge type of architectures. How do we manage those? How do we control that data? New security risk vectors suddenly coming in, through temperature sensors or whatever it can be, So new, very interesting challenges. So I think we're going to be busy for the coming years as well, I believe.
That sounds like another episode of Let's Talk Data to me.
Probably upcoming.
Yeah, upcoming. Yes, exactly. All right, so keep yours, whatever the term is.
This is about your network, your connectivity, virtualized, automated. much better tool, AI type of tools, to managing a more complex, not just LAN, but more specifically WAN and Wi-Fi network. That is the next iteration of what we're doing. We call it SD Connect, and that's probably an episode coming up later, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Super cool. Well, all right. It's been very interesting having you on here talking about multi-cloud and the complex worlds of every company's future, really, looking into how to not only keep the lights on, but how to innovate and use their data to the fullest. Hope to see you on again on a future episode, and thank you for this one.
Thank you. Take care.